So in undergrad, I had this fantastic sociology class. It was called Race Relations. It was a closed class. That meant that everybody that registered for the class were the only people that could sit inside of the class. This class was not a class that you could audit. And if you haven't been to college yet, or you never attended traditional college, auditing is where you can sit in on a class, see what they're talking about, see if you want to be able to take it, right? But in this class, in our race relations class, we discussed things by racial perspective based off of how you identified, all the way down to the nationality. So it wasn't just blacks and whites and Hispanics and Asians. It was African Americans, Caribbean Americans. And then you also had those that were Mexican, those that were Dominican. So we weren't talking about the broader identifiers. We kind of went all the way down to the nationality identifiers, right? And so in this class, we had conversations about the way that we're raised, and one of the questions that was asked by this teacher, who I absolutely loved, is she said, how many of you guys were told as you were growing up that you could not bring someone home from a different ethnicity? And the surprise in the classroom was that white people didn't know that black people told their kids that they can't bring home somebody white. That was the surprise. And even now with this segregation conversation, what I am noticing is that there are some white people that don't know and also don't understand that black people are raised to also stay out of and away from white people unless it's necessary. That is a normal directive in a black household. You're like, listen, ain't no need for you to be over there if you don't need to be over there. And that's what I was referring to in the first video when I said that there are a lot of black people who outside of work do not have interactions with white people. It is a preservation tactic. So there is a different reason as to why black people are conditioned. I don't want you to think that it's just something that is a one-off for just one black person. No, black people as the collective are conditioned to not be in white people's spaces, places, and business unless you absolutely have to be. And that absolutely have to be is for work-related things. May I remind you that when especially black women were house workers, right? They went to the white person's house, they worked, they cooked, they left and went back to a black community. A lot of people have seen The Help. That is very much accurate. That is an accurate depiction of how black and whites interact. And so out of a need for safety, black people don't interact. And it's interesting because a lot of white people don't know that we're raised that way. It is the way that we are raised. And the reason why is because although there are a lot of well-meaning white people are also blind to how their behavior may cause us harm. Right. So, for example, there was this lady that was married to a black guy, and she talks about a white woman that was married to a black guy. And she talks about how one day her husband had asked her to go ahead and renew the registration on the vehicle. Right. They're a well-to-do family in a well-to-do neighborhood. And he had asked her. She had forgot. He had reminded her. She had forgot. One day he's in the car, driving the car. And he gets pulled over. And the officer is like, your registration has expired. And he's panicked, right? Because number one, he's stopped by a police officer in a good neighborhood right? And so all of these triggers are going on at the same time, on top of the fact that he's in a car where the registration has expired. So now he's going through these extra questions that has him uneasy, and he goes home and he's like, I told you to do the registration. I got pulled over. This is a prime example of how a behavior that doesn't seem like a big deal at all, in the context of Black people or people of color, can cause us panic, because the outcome is very different for us being in a car with no registration than it is for a white person to be in a car with no registration. And so that's something that I want people to understand as you guys do continue the dialogue, because I am somebody that loves dialogue, right? But the reality is that no one is asking the gazelle why it runs from a lion. No one is. Because it's prey, right? And the gazelle knows that in the lion's presence, they may or may not survive. Very much the same with Black people. It has been hundreds of years of data that shows that whenever we are in the presence of white people, there is a higher probability, almost a guarantee, that we will experience an adverse encounter, an adverse situation, and an undesirable outcome. And that's something that I want, that I wish that white people would consider, is what are some of the habits that you have that may be illegal, right? Let's talk about hockey players or hockey fans, right? Or that may just shouldn't be done, that really hasn't caused you any harm. Now, put that in the context of if a Black person was doing it. Do you see how them even being near you while you do that thing could cause them harm? It's a thought.